This is the Bay Area Book Festival's program on mutual aid and community care in California. I'm Brian Edwards-Tiekert from KPFA. You can clap whenever you want. I'm not used to it. I usually just speak into the ether and no one gets to speak back. My home station is a few blocks from here. It's the world's first listener-supported radio station. We've managed to muddle along on grassroots support since 1949. And we should also start by acknowledging that we're not just in Berkeley, we're also in Bujun, which is the homeland of Chochenyo-speaking Ohlone people. Our topic is mutual aid and community care. For a lot of Californians, these are issues that were thrown into sharp relief by the string of catastrophic fires that I would say started in 2017, when the Tubbs fire tore through Santa Rosa with virtually no warning for the peoples whose homes it leveled. Crises can bring out the best in people. There's a community broadcaster in Santa Rosa, KPFA, that like overnight turned into an emergency dispatch operation for the Spanish-speaking community in the region. You know, sending people with access to vehicles to help evacuate people and animals who didn't, then telling folks where shelters were for with people who feared interaction with the Immigration and Customs Enforcement arm of the first Trump administration. Collection sites sprung up around here in the East Bay to get donated supplies, up to the evacuation shelters that have sprung up in the North Bay. Mask Oakland came into existence to get N95 masks to people living on the street who were hearing that they were being advised by public officials to take shelter indoors from the toxic smoke that was turning our skies orange, who had obviously never considered there was a whole class of people who have no way to take shelter indoors. And they became one of the bulwarks of our community level response to the COVID pandemic just a couple of short years later. In most coverage, these mutual aid efforts always seem like they come out of nowhere, but they almost always come out of organizing lineages, especially lineages in communities that are often in crisis without any disaster. We're just over a mile from the birthplace of the Black Panther Party. It's an organization that got covered because they did armed patrols in neighborhoods that were terrorized by Oakland's police department, but they almost certainly devoted more time and resources to programs they called survival pending revolution. Things like feeding breakfast to kids who would be going to school hungry without them. I want to set that up as framing for the topic of mutual aid, and that leads me to today's panelists. Sitting immediately to my left is Jocelyn Jackson, chef, artist, activist, and recovering attorney, who co-founded the People's Kitchen Collective, very much in the lineage of those Black Panther survival programs, and also serving as chef in residence at San Francisco's Museum of the African Diaspora. Adéniké Amin, artist, photographer, writer-director who works as the storytelling lead at BLACspace Cooperative, an organization explicitly devoted to not just liberation, but cooperativism. Margaret Elysia Garcia is a writer and poet, veteran newspaper reporter in California's rural Northeast, and survivor of the 2021 Dixie Fire. And Dani Burlison is a journalist, writer, and teacher, and co-editor with Margaret of the book that I'm holding, Red Flag Warning, Mutual Aid and Survival in California's Fire Country. One more round of applause, please. Jocelyn, since I said something about lineages, I was hoping we could start with you. When you got the People's Kitchen off the ground, what were you drawing from?
It's such a good question and such a beautiful place to start. When we talk about legacies, there is such a rich tradition to pull from in the place where I am now, as well as this ancestral reach of legacies. And so when I think about People's Kitchen Collective and where it formed from, I'm grateful that I can say initially it formed from the legacies and traditions of Saka Kaval as the original founder. He is Indo-Kenyan and has a complete, huge history of being present in Kenya after the major migration from India, and this rich experience of what is it to be part of diaspora migration from that perspective. And during college, he had that moment of, where are my people at? You know, where are my flavors at? And did this incredible thing of making it for himself. And started People's Kitchen from that place of how can we serve ourselves the flavors of home and be in the same moment doing the radical education that our ancestors insist on. And that's how People's Kitchen started. It's had probably 6 different iterations since then, because one of the other things we know about survival skills is to be iterative, to be adaptive, to be embracing change. And so in 2015, we became People's Kitchen Collective, and Sita Kuratomi Bomek and myself joined as leadership. And we entered into this new phase of really claiming all of our backgrounds, all of our cultural histories, and the place where we are, which is very much, what does the Black Panther Party have to tell us about the people's survival programs? What do these major traditions of radical political and social justice in this area have to tell us about, yes, we want to feed the people, but what do we need to talk about at that table? And how can we make a real purposeful call to action at the end of every meal that goes into the world beyond just this moment in time and feeds people beyond the table that we share. And I'm so grateful that we get to do that every time and have found so many different ways to do it. And often within this tradition of artistic practice is the other part I want to mention. We do find ourselves at the intersection of food and art and social justice. And I love how within the arts tradition of social practice, we've been able to propel a lot of our political education and a lot of our social justice into the world and in new ways that feel as powerful as what our ancestors have told us is totally timely for this moment as well.
I have a follow-up on linguistic lineages. So the Panthers didn't call it they did mutual aid. They're reading Marx and Lenin and Mao, and mutual aid is like anarchist vocabulary from Peter Kropotkin. It's language you use, and it's language you claim them under. When did that language enter your lineage?
I think that's a good question because, you know, like you say, how language is used often is, it's basically a power trip. You know, whoever gets to name a thing and tell it and tag it either oppressive or liberatory is telling us a specific story. So when I'm talking about a Black Panther Party tradition, I'm talking very much about self-determination. I'm talking about nobody's coming, so what are we going to do for ourselves? And for me, that is what our present definition of mutual aid is. It is the stakes are the highest they could possibly be. We see how people are able to show up in the ways that they can, but often short of what the lived reality really requires. And that's the place where, you know, whether it's self-determination or mutual aid, it is characterized as something that we're doing for ourselves because we know it has to be for us, by us, in order for it to be sustainable and in order for it to be realistic to the conditions. And I think that's what the Black Panther Party was doing. The Black Panther Party has only recently gotten free of the language trick of being terrorists, of being so many different things, and finally being respected as an organization that was defending itself from an incredible attack, a social attack, a political attack, where they knew very much our people are dying. We have this real example every week of our people are dying. How do we meet that moment? How do we stay out of the feeling of being powerless? And I'm so grateful they gave us so much, over 60 programs, beyond simply the ethic of being when it comes to what it is to feel the community of relationship that has each other's back, right? There's so much legacy there that we can pull from. that is defining the terms that we need in order to stay relevant and also empowered as we meet every single catastrophe.
Adéniké, tell us about your work with BLACspace Cooperative.
Yes, absolutely. So BLACspace Cooperative is a cultural hub here in Oakland, California. And we were created and designed to support Black-led arts and culture organizations in Oakland with their infrastructure. So we are a startup business coaching, cooperative, and mutual aid network. So that means we seek out folks who work in the community in Oakland, and we support them with their infrastructure. So infrastructure, and then we bring them into our network, and we have this whole very dope, very fly mutual aid membership where we're creating these resources and programs and tools for Black arts and culture organizations in Oakland to survive and thrive in this climate and also scale their organizations. And so what I do, I come in and I basically make that look sexy. When we're talking about social work, when we're talking about work with impact, when we're talking about grassroots, a lot of times it can look very stagnant. So I come in and I communicate that to you all, to my community, aesthetically, spiritually, yeah.
So, small, new organization, one of a handful of staff positions is specifically dedicated to storytelling. Why?
Why not? Storytelling is everything. I mean, human beings, we love stories. We understand our existence on this planet through storytelling. We understand ourselves through storytelling. We understand other people through storytelling. Storytelling creates legacy. It creates myth. It creates everything, our world. So in this work, it's telling the story of this is who we are. It's reminding folks this is who we are. This is how we work together. Never forget. Go out and prosper. It's vital that these stories of the way that we were created, we are in lineage to the Black Panthers. We are in lineage to this grassroots machine, really community-centered, community-driven, mutual aid machine that says exactly that. We are all we have and all we need. And telling that story looks like just that. It looks like just that. It looks like just that. It looks like being in community, getting to know folks, understanding what everyone is doing, sharing that on platforms, making sure that folks are informed. Yeah.
Margaret, could we start with the fire that drove your family out of Plymouth?
Sure. So I want to talk about that, but a little bit before, I want to tell you a little bit about Plymouth County, because I bet you a whole bunch of people in this room are like, Plymouth what? Where's that? So if you've ever been to Chico, or now we use Paradise as a signifier. We're like, you know where Paradise is? And people are like, yeah. We're like, go 90 minutes northeast of that, and that's where Indian Valley is. Indian Valley was it still is, the poorest area of Plymouth County. The county seat is Quincy, California, which most Bay Area people know from the High Sierra Music Festival. That's every summer. But Indian Valley had this weird sort of vibe to it, which I really, really loved. We had the highest number of PhDs and artists in Indian Valley. We also had the highest number of high school dropouts. We had both the highest income and the lowest income in the county, and we had a great sense of kind of live and let live pride. Like your neighbor, you're like, what the heck does he think he's doing with whatever? But you're like, you know, you're gonna call him if a mountain lion tries to eat something in your yard. So there's very much already a good mutual aid sort of thing happening pre-fire where, you know, I guarantee you none of my neighbors agreed with me politically on anything, but I taught at Feather River College for 15 years, and they all all sent their kids to me rather than those other teachers from the East Coast. So there's this rural deep, we call it the deep north, right? Plumas County, where there's this complete distrust of the Bay Area and all sorts of strange conspiracy theories that a lot of the settlers in the area have. We also, that part of Plumas County had the highest Native American population as well, hence our name Indian Valley, which is actually a misnomer because it accounts for less minerals being found in that part of Plumas County, and that's the part of the county they pushed all Native Americans into, as well as the Mountain Maidu, who were already there. So that is our backdrop before the Dixie Fire, which burned down my adopted hometown of Greenville, as well as Warner Valley, a little tiny community of Canyon Dam, and Indian Falls. So we lost 4 communities completely. And so our struggle post-fire has been with both the county and the state to find us relevant, even though we're tiny, and to, for example, when it took a very long time for a state of emergency to be declared in our area because none of our property was worth anything. And while we were burning, Tahoe caught on fire, and they were declared a state of emergency in 48 hours. So that is where a lot of our distrust comes from, is this very poor economic area. And yeah, we could go on, but I don't want to hog it here.
Okay, we may have some follow-ups for you.
Yeah, okay.
But Dani, maybe you could tell us about the book that the two of you put together. What did you think was missing from the growing corpus of California fire books?
Oh my goodness. How long do I have to answer this?
Take your time.
I think that what Margaret and I have been talking about, first of all, like we've known each other for years and years. She was living in Plumas County, I was living in Sonoma County. And every time there was a fire, we'd check up on each other. And then we started talking about this idea of putting together, either co-writing a book or creating the anthology, which we created, AK Press Publishing, probably like 8 years ago.
Yeah. It was before our fire.
Yeah, and I was in Sonoma County, and I'm Santa Rosa in the 2017 fires that were very devastating. So as we're communicating back and forth, we're kind of toying around with the idea of putting together a book. We're also reading the New York Times and the Los Angeles Times and their perspectives on rural areas. Margaret can speak to that a little bit more. We're both very upset about the way that...
Still upset about that.
I think what was missing were the voices of people living in rural areas. I live in Santa Rosa. The fires there were called the Wine Country Fires. Not everybody has a winery in Sonoma County, just for the record. So in a lot of the reporting, what was overlooked were the people that were really impacted in the Wine Country Fires, which are the undocumented migrant farm workers that are harvesting grapes for our wine in October when the fires struck. So that's just one part of it. But you know, as Margaret was speaking about how long it took for them to declare that fire an emergency because it was mostly lower income folks, that's what we saw missing. Over and over again, there was a lot of victim blaming of like, well, why do those people live there anyway? I went up to Paradise, and I grew up in Tehama County, so I grew up right in the middle of where all the Northern California fires are. But even in Paradise too, it's a very low income community. A lot of people didn't have homeowners insurance. And instead of reporting on why is that, how can these people be helped? How are people there helping one another? There was this blame, like, well, they shouldn't have lived there in the first place. They should have homeowners insurance. So this real lack of understanding of class issues was a huge, huge drive around why we wanted to write the book.
I would add to that, I have gotten into, and when I was first out of college, I worked for the LA Times, but I got into arguments with LA Times reporters who came to our area, and they find the 2 Bay Area transplants who moved up there to do a story on they shouldn't live here. And they find the 2 Trump supporters without teeth who are drunk on the bar, porch, and decide that that is who is here. And that is who we're gonna report on. And so I got in an argument with one. I was like, you realize our community is like 49% Native American, Mountain Maidu who are from here. Are you comfortable telling them they should leave? You really want to have that conversation? And,
Margaret will have that conversation.
Because I will have that conversation. And yeah, so there was a lot of, and as a reporter in the area for a very tiny organization, I was very happy to be supported by Feather Publishing to change the narrative of what the national news and the state news was throwing out there. And they were very good to give me a column after the fire to push it in the opposite direction.
Feather Publishing was like a holdout, independently owned local chain of newspapers.
Yeah, they lasted, I think they started in 1865, and they closed down pretty much in the middle of COVID. So.
What did your area lose when it lost those papers?
Well, I mean, we lost a lot, but we've actually gained some since. We went to a monthly magazine only that did regional stories, so we still had like a little bit of a presence left. But actually, a bunch of community members were upset that we were folding. And we were an organization that had 30 people, and then we had 20 people, and then we had at the time of the fire, there were 5 of us left in this news organization trying to pull all this stuff together, which was crazy. My editor wound up with exhaustion in the hospital twice during that time period. So it was just crazy and not sustainable way to work. But we had enough people in the community that wanted to be trained up as community journalists. So now there's a website called theplumasun.org. And one journalist who used to work for us is semi-retired, and she's training up all these people who never wrote in their life to cover their section of the county. And there's another woman working there who is getting grants to be able to pay these people to do that work. So I'm very actually excited for the future of Plymouth County and them being able to sustain this. And they're going into the high schools getting kids to report in their areas. So trying to stay away from, because in rural areas you have like a bunch of volunteers and they're all between 65 and 90, and we don't want to put that on those folks. Like, that's too much. So the fact that we're going younger and younger is great.
I want to come back to you, Jocelyn. In the green room, you were telling me about something you've been working on through People's Kitchen Collective, the Earthseed Project, inspired by the Octavia Butler books that feature a California constantly on fire. Tell us about the work.
It is, I think, a necessary first question. How many people have read Parable of the Sower? This is my kind of audience. Thank you for being well informed about life we're living right now through speculative fiction. Octavia Butler wrote these 2 books, Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents, and it was meant to be an ongoing series. Perhaps the 3rd one would have been called Parable of the Trickster. I was in Huntington Library and looking at her records, her papers. But there could have been several more books because she had that much information from 1990, present day, to speculate about and extrapolate our present day. This book started in July of 2024, and so in 2023, we decided to do our own version of The Long Walk North that's in Parable of the Sower. We went through 5 different regions over a 3-month period, one at a time. We didn't do an extended walk. We weren't that ambitious. But what we did was start in Pasadena, Altadena area, which is now not there. So we made a film about a place that is now destroyed, which we don't ever want to do. And also we recorded something that will never be again, which is heartbreaking, but also part of the storytelling, right? We were grateful that we were able to meet with different mutual aid organizations during this walk, different people, indigenous folks, in order to learn from place and people as we went. And that included places like LA Can, or Miss Rogers Neighborhood, or Polo's Pantry, or Masimoto Farm. Just so many great organizations, about 5 different organizations, 3 to 5 each region. And the regions were the LA area, San Joaquin Valley, Central Coast, the Bay Area, and then up to Mendocino and the North Bay area. I say that as background to say that we do this thing, we go on this journey together, and Fox Nakai, the filmmaker, says, I'll go with you. And so we had an embedded filmmaker during this entire time, and we created a 2-hour documentary film that premiered last May. This film is nothing like what we've done in the past. We are usually known for doing community meals. So why did we do this incredibly, pretty ambitious project, slightly unhinged, during a pandemic, experience? And it really was, people try to tell us things from the past all the time. It's about time that we listened. And so we took it to heart that we should make that journey. We took it to heart that we should learn to really survive together and know right now that there is survival happening in our midst, and that it is so important that we need to know about it. Even just right now, learning of all the projects on this panel, we know better how to survive together. And that's really what we're called on as human beings to do, is to be in right relationship, is to be in a place of reciprocity and trust building, to be able to risk change. And one of the things that we use as far as that language trick that we were talking about is the phrase radical hospitality. What makes hospitality radical for PTC has been different through the years, but in this experience of creating this project, it really is fundamentally about how we're able to risk change, how we are able to take these moments of building relationship and seeing really profound ways that if we go even deeper and wider, whether it's across a complete state or if it's across your city block, each of us has that responsibility to build those relationships and risk change that can happen when you build trust. And I was sharing with you, this is the program from the documentary premiere. I have a few of these if anyone would like them, but it is an ongoing experience of being able to view this film. We'll be at BAMFA on July 27th for a screening then, but we'll be going all across the country with it.
So I want to take a round on the next question, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience. So get your waving hands ready. I've been thinking about the narrative dimension of mutual aid. If you ask an organizer to make like the strategic political case for doing mutual aid organizing, they'll say, well, you help people, that's worthwhile in and of itself. 2, you organize people to show that we can help each other, which is empowering. But 3, you kind of show up the government that's supposed to be helping them, right? You embarrass it often into doing its job a little bit better. And that's been my framework for mutual aid for a long time. And now we have a government that doesn't care about helping people in any way, shape, or form. And I'm wondering how the present moment is affecting how all of you think about this type of work.
I think this is giving people an opportunity to remember our innate power as being human beings and the sovereignty that we have outside of governments, and the power that we have intrinsically as, it's not about what color we are, what our background is, what our work is, what our status is, how much money we make, what's our spirituality. It really comes down to, if I cut my arm and I cut your arm, we're both gonna bleed red blood. We are under the same system of life, of humanity, and it's important that we recognize that it's bigger than government. This is about our survival as a human race. It's bigger than that. This is about us caring for this planet, caring for each other, caring for ourselves, caring for our communities, it's so much bigger. And I think we can get lost in the government structure of it all, and giving that entity so much power. But, you know, in fact, our connection and our understanding of our connection as a human race is really what is going to propel us into this next timeline of humanity. And with BLACspace, I think, you know, we center Black arts and culture organizations, and also, you know, we are in alliance with the Solidarity Movement. So anyone who is about human rights, our right to live, our right to this earth, that is who we are in alignment with. And I think the more that we begin to understand that these are all systems, they're just created. There's not as much power, they only have as much power as we give them. And we give them power by not being informed by one, who we are, who we come from, and tapping into that power and being able to use that power to also organize, to also create new systems, to also create new languages and models and ways of living. I think, you know, there's a lot of fear-mongering and powerlessness amongst us, you know, as humans, as, you know, Black folks, of giving this engine this power. And I think, you know, it's really important for the work that we do. You know, we are very Black-centered, but also just letting everyone know that our power is something that is a birthright. Our sovereignty is a birthright. Our health, our happiness, that's our birthright. And I think as we start to create those new narratives and start to seek ways of coming together to create new models and infrastructure, it will then weaken this government system that has fear-mongered and brainwashed us to believe that we can't exist without them, where in fact they can't exist without us.
Yeah, I think if there's there's many takeaways from our experience with fire, but one that stays with me, and I really hate the word resilient, so I hesitate to use that word. But I think I can speak for Plumas County on this one, and that is we saw nobody coming to help us, or coming to help us far too late. And we already took matters into our own hands, and we've already started to rebuild on our own. And we have different small groups within the county who is doing this work without help from government. And I'm pretty certain we're going to continue along that vein and not wait for somebody to help us that's not coming. And I don't think there's anyone in the county who thinks of government first as a place that's going to solve problems for them at this point.
All the anarchists are now going to move to Plumas County. No, I agree. I think also that we do give our government way too much credit. My experience with mutual aid networks in Sonoma County and other places too where there have been fires, people show up before the authorities do. Also, don't donate to Red Cross, donate to your local organizations that are already in relationship with the people there, that are already have these mutual aid programs that are already running, because it's going to strengthen those. The mutual aid networks in your community already have those relationships. They know where things are. They know who the people are to contact. And we saw that North Bay Organizing Project in Sonoma County. It's amazing. North Bay Jobs with Justice. They stepped up immediately, within hours. I mean, our fires happened overnight, so it was like first thing in the morning. They started a DocuFund like 2 days after the fire started, which is a program to collect donations and give money to undocumented folks who aren't eligible for federal emergency funding. And they're a lot of them are out of work when there's a fire because, again, fire season is also great harvest season, right? So, yeah, I think that just watching all of the mutual aid with multiple fires, like, why are we still thinking the government's coming to save us? Like, I see it in action, and I don't understand why we're not doing that every day. Like, trans folks need protection right now, immigrants need protection right now. Like, there's so many different things that we could be doing, and I know there are a lot of, mutual aid networks and organizations doing that work, but we can live like this every day. And we should be, and I know a lot of you are, everybody here is, I trust you. But it's an amazing example. And again, it's usually the folks that are the most marginalized, right? It's always the poorest folks, the folks that have dealt with police brutality, that are undocumented. They're the ones that show up first time and time and time again. And I'm just, always thinking, like, how do we get the people with money to come along with us before it actually impacts them directly? So, anyway, I'll stop ranting.
This would be the time to raise your hands if you have a question. Go ahead, Jocelyn.
I just wanted to put something explicitly out that I think all of us have mentioned as my response to that question, which is mutual aid is a spiritual practice. And I think we need to say that loudly as often as we can, because as a spiritual practice, if you don't practice it, it goes away. You lose it. It ends. It has to be that daily practice. But also, if you don't practice mutual aid, it stops being sacred. And I think that's a real deep part of this, is that often emergency gets us into our caring selves very quickly. There's an adrenaline rush that gets us there, but we have to find the ways together. It's hard to do it individually. Together, how to be in that space of deep care on a regular basis. Not to the point of burnout, but in the ways that we do when it is a spiritual practice. So I just wanted to make sure to uplift that. I think it was something that much was needed.
And also, mutual aid predates government.
Thank you very much. It's the original way.
It's the original way. So this is nothing new. Like, this is ancient. This is how we were surviving and living with one another. So government is the new kid at school, not mutual aid. And we already practice mutual aid. It's called family. It's called our friends group. So we're just expanding that love and that connection and that care that we give to our family, to our friends, to folks who live next door to us, to folks who live down the street.
So Jocelyn made a reference to the Earthsea project. Did I hear that correctly? And I was expecting to hear a discussion of Ursula K. Le Guin, and I got really excited. And then you mentioned Octavia Butler. Then I got really excited because I was like, did Octavia Butler and Ursula K. Le Guin get together and have like a mutual aid nonprofit baby? So I don't know. I was just kind of wondering if you had anything to say about that.
We have an enunciation discrepancy. Earthseed and D. Yeah.
There's some pieces to be written. And we're in the right place for her.
While Mark makes his way around the room, I do want to ask you about burnout. Early days of the COVID pandemic, all these mutual aid organizations sprang up. Like in my neighborhood, I was delivering things to neighbors who were like medically vulnerable and shut-in and felt great about it. Everybody got burned out and stopped putting in energy about the same time. It seemed like about 6 months in. And it made me think about the limits.
We have something for that. It really is. You have to build the relationship so that you can take turns. I was pointing out that Mia Mingus, many of you people in this room will absolutely know Mia Mingus, am I right? She does a lot of transformative and restorative justice work and created a model called the Care Pod. You have to create a system of sustainability before you even get started, or you will absolutely drain all energy in moments, And so one of the concerted processes is finding your people intentionally pouring in during non-emergency times. So when the emergency is activated, you know who's got what when. You know how to take turns. It has to be really planned. And I want us to really love that process. I want it to be, oh, it's cookie delivery day. Oh, it's shared, a neighborhood meal day. It's those moments of creating our care pods is also essential to survival. And burnout is so 50s. Like, it's so old. It's like we know better at this point, right? Like, we really know better. And when you know better, you do better. I want us all to do better because burnout will absolutely be the antithesis of liberation that we want.
Sorry.
Well, I just, yeah, exactly what you said. And when you were saying earlier too, Jocelyn, about, you mentioned burnout before, and we were talking about mutual aid. To me, true mutual aid, living it as a spiritual practice, as a lifestyle, prevents that burnout. It really, really does. If you're plugged in and you have your people and you're doing community care outside of those times of emergency,
Your muscles are strong.
yeah, you're like, oh, I know how to do this. And the taking turns part, like, don't be a martyr about it. Take turns, take rest, and check in with your people. You don't have to do everything all the time by yourself. And if you have a really solid mutual aid network and a pod, I'd argue it would actually prevent that burnout.
I was going to give the example of after the fire, Indian Valley started a thing called the Indian Valley Collective, where the whole community would meet in the elementary school cafeteria, which didn't burn, once a month. And there were officers, and they were like, this is for 6 months, and then we'll get new officers. And then another 6 months, new people. We want no one to burn out. We want people to keep coming to these things.
And train people up.
And train people up to do things. Food was handled that same way because you could get free food, but they went to different people who'd been making food, so nobody was feeling stressed to have to do it all. And I just applauded that. I thought that was the best way to keep going.
From the audience.
Hi, I love everything you just said about burnout, and one thing I've observed in my own friend circles is it's sometimes hard to even admit that you need that help, right? And to allow other people to support you through mutual aid. And so, my question is what are some questions or some mental maps, or what advice would you offer to people who are trying to get over that block of not feeling like a burden whenever they're expressing any need for aid?
Conversations, being accessible to talk. Talking is a huge currency. Conversation is a huge currency. So being able to have conversations with those loved ones, listening, being able to listen and hold space. I think when we start to build community trust through showing up as active and really good listeners, that starts to make people feel safe and comfortable to tell you what they need. If they feel like you're a terrible listener, you're never there, you're just busy, like, no one's gonna wanna tell you what's really going on. But if you're coming to me, you're asking me, you're talking to me, and there's a consistent conversation and relationship building, then I would be more likely to assume other folks would be more likely to open up and say, hey, or it might slip in through conversation, like, oh yeah, it's really hard for me this month to pay my rent, and those are the cues. So being open, being an active listener, checking in with your folks, taking them out for a walk, holding space for them to feel safe and comfortable to share what's going on in their life.
Okay, I just wanted to add, it's a very important question because that point of resistance in any given person is also the antithesis of liberation. And so it's so important to acknowledge that it's there, but I want you to get over it. Like, I really, today, I want you to commit to getting over it. Say it out loud to as many people as you need to. Because it's basically the concept of colonization winning, for you to keep that as an approach to how we think people will respond. So it is the action for me of giving and receiving, that reciprocity. Pour into someone else before you expect someone to pour into you is one of the exercises that can get us into that place of being comfortable asking for help. Not that it's transactional, but you have built trust by providing that you now feel like you can ask for that support in return. And it doesn't have to be explicit, but I want you to know the explicit version is also great. And that's literally making a full list of all the things you need, finding the people in your life you can ask those things of, and asking every single one of them. Just practice it. Because we have to get over that, assume everybody needs help. We have to get over the block to that request and that, both the giving and the receiving. Because it really is the thing that most systems rely on to keep us imprisoned in systems that are just jerks, you know? It's just, so I want all of us to be released from that, and I'm so glad you asked the question.
I just want to make a comment too to practice. Speaking from personal experience, it's very hard for me also to ask for help or receive help, and I feel guilty and I feel like I have to overcompensate in return. So even this sounds really stupid, but even something little like asking your friend to get you a glass of water from the other room without feeling bad about it. You can tell how bad I'm still in recovery from this. But practicing just with little asks, so when the big thing comes, it's not going to feel so overwhelming, I think. So I've heard.
Well, I love the concept of receiving as political practice. I also thank people when they ask me to help with something, because people carry guilt about asking, and I'm like, oh God, no, you let me do something that let me feel like my day contributed something positive to the world, and keeping my relationship to you, and yeah, it was just moving a heavy thing for 10 minutes, but thank you for letting me. Right, back to the audience.
My question is around, sorry, I guess I want to preface my question first by, I'm sure anybody who is in online spaces sees the discourse that happens online, where there's quote unquote infighting or purity policing within our movements. My question is, how do we go about organizing and coalition building while still maintaining certain baseline principles that aren't necessarily like arguable, but also allowing people to make mistakes within these movements? How do we, I'm curious what your thoughts are on how we go about doing that.
If I could say a couple things here, briefly. I think about that all the time, and I have removed myself from places online for my own mental health and pushed some things aside. But however, I am in conversation with previous neighbors and community in Northern California, and when I can, I just like to remind people of the fact that we helped each other, of the fact that we had each other's back, and it shouldn't matter that I am X, Y, and Z, and they are ABC, and they're like, we are not seeing eye to eye on other things, and I really try to push that forward online, and I try not to get in arguments anymore, but really try to provide context to things. Because quite frankly, like I lived in Trump country, you know, 1 out of 8 people in my community did not vote for him. Just 1 out of 8. But it's a beautiful country, and I'm very much opposed to people of color not having access to rural spaces. My family was one of like 3 Mexican American families in our community that everyone else thought were related, and we weren't. But I strongly oppose having to flee those spaces for safety. I want to make the safety in rural communities. I want them to have to deal with the rest of us in that space. And just keeping the dialogue as open as possible is my only way to do that.
I'll just add to that, that's one of the most important questions of the day as well. One of the things I like bragging about with People's Kitchen Collective is that we have our own therapist. And we don't have, thank you very much, and we don't have a therapist to help us resolve conflict. We have a pre-therapist. We have a person in our lives that's been a part of our lives, I think over 8 years now. And the setup is that we do relationship building. We don't do conflict resolution. We do the relationship building and it prevents the conflict from happening, or it allows us to engage in conflict as if it's a conversation, because that can happen miraculously. So it really is important for me, as I'm seeing more and more examples of organizations breaking apart, of people leaving, saying, it's a peace out moment because of this value misalignment. I really need folks to know that it is also our responsibility to have the helpers when it comes to staying in relationship. And for it to be a proactive pursuit and not one where we're already at the point of breaking. And we're presently, we have a solidarity statement, you can see it on our website, and that outlines our values. You know what you're getting when you interact with People's Kitchen Collective. There's literally nothing hidden in our political values, in our perspective of the world, right? But what we're developing right now in a more explicit way is the internal, because we have a whole crew, like a whole group of people that we volunteer with on a regular basis, collaborators, partners. And so we're developing and resourcing ourselves for that internal solidarity statement. For this is the way we want to treat each other, this is the way we want to communicate with one another. And again, this is proactive. Because we already have such a sweet way of relating to one another because of the work that we've done and because of the way that we have decided to move through the world together. We're proactively making sure that continues as we're seeing all these breakings all around, the country, the world, everywhere. And so that's what I encourage, is just proactively resourcing to prevent that moment where you see something online or something is hot button and there has to be a reaction. It's like, no, we need to survive together. And it's an apocalypse, so let's really prioritize.
We've got time for one more question.
Okay. The fires in Sonoma and Mendocino County really underscore the importance of community building. I made a film, Wild and Wild, about this. It interviews in Coffee Park. And there were more than 1,000 houses that burned down in Coffee Park. 88 people died. And why that discrepancy? People knew which neighbors needed help. They broke into their homes, they helped people who couldn't get out. And I'd like to know if that kind of community building has followed proactively, because big fires tend to happen where big fires already happened. So that should be a huge wake-up call, and also an example of the importance of what you're talking about.
Yes. There's been an incredible amount of community building in Sonoma County and Mendocino County. I don't know as much about what's happening up in Mendocino because I'm a Sonoma County person. One of the things that's been so amazing to see and so important are people actually listening to the indigenous people of California around cultural burns, cultural fire. There's a woman in our book who actually lives up on the Yurok Reservation way up north, but she's been actually a part of training CAL FIRE even on doing, CAL FIRE calls them prescribed burns or cultural burns. That's just one example. And so many people in the community are learning how to do that themselves. Like you can go out with different organizations. I think Fire Forward might be one that does it. You can go out and learn how to participate in these prescribed burns on property. That's just one part of it. But I've also seen a lot of folks organizing in their neighborhoods and in their communities, tapping in again to those organizations that are already there and already have been doing relationship building, especially in the more rural parts of Sonoma County, because it's not always where the fire goes. As you know, Coffee Park is a huge neighborhood right in the middle of Santa Rosa that almost completely burned down. But there is a lot of work being done there.
Yeah, I would echo that for Plumas and Butte County. I've been seeing that happen as well, with the cultural burns being a significant part of going forward. And I know in some of our communities, in Plymouth County, really all neighbors getting together to build fire-safe communities as people's insurance were about to get canceled, and like a great outpouring of realizing, where there's elderly in our community and they're not going to be able to get to their tree and not going to be able to get to their yard, and having other people come in and help them for free.
Another thing, just real quick, that I've seen a lot of in Sonoma County too is organizing farm workers around safety and trying to organize the winery owners actually to teach them their responsibility for providing PPE, for allowing their workers to leave if they're in evacuation zones. So there's been a lot of really good positive movement there too.
Please join me in giving another round of applause to our